My name is Josh Corman. I'm the current president of the Alumni Association here at Country Day. Thank you all for coming out to our speaker series. This is something that we've been doing for some years now, but in the past it has historically been something where we've had an alumni come and speak to the crowd. And we've had John Holt Smith, and we've had Rick and John Bonnell come and speak about Haiti, and Jennifer Tracy Garby, who came and spoke about kind of her experience as being a writer and a critic and an editor. And now we're kind of going on to the next venture here, and we're gonna have a panel here where we're trying to open this up a little bit more to the community. Jeff was very instrumental in putting this together. Jeff is the co-creator of the Mental Health Channel. They are sponsoring us with us tonight. He's going to moderate here with at least 4 of our guests. Hopefully Dr. Blewett, who seems to be running a little bit behind, is going to join us later on. Jeff is an alumnus of both Country Day and also Davidson College. He's been in the production and broadcasting business for 20 years, putting together different broadcast and theatrical documentaries for different audiences all around the world. It's been seen on NBC, PBS, DirecTV, HBO, and IMAX. Before that, Jeff was also a student here at Country Day and a teacher as well. So his company, the Mental Health Channel, you can reach that at mentalhealthchannel.tv. Right now they have 12 different documentary series on there for a total of 120 different shows. And with that, I'll give you Jeff.
I love it. Good. Everybody hear me? Yes. Well, thanks for coming out on a Tuesday night. Talk about brain health. Pretty exciting turnout. We actually had 170 RSVPs. I think we're having some athletic traffic issues among other things, but we're so glad you're here, and I'm glad that these panelists are here. And Ed Chisholm just got his MD tonight since Dr. Blewett isn't here. We just go ahead and give him that title. Do you accept that?
No, thank you.
Oh, and first let me note, I heard some grumblings. No one's going to be diagnosed here this evening. That is not the plan. This is a general awareness on brain health and mental wellness discussion. We've got K through 12 represented. So it is broad. We want it to be informative and entertaining and encourage some collaboration. We got a lot of questions that were submitted. If yours does not make it up in this round table, don't be worried. It's just that we have a lot to go over. We hope that you learn a lot, you enjoy what you hear, and you share what you hear. And now I want to let my panelists introduce themselves, including now with Dr. Ed Chisholm.
My name is Ed Chisholm. I'm the athletic trainer here at Fort Country Day. This is my 28th year. I received my undergraduate degree at the University of Arizona, my master's at Ohio University, worked in Cedar Hill, Texas for a year, and got over here just as quickly as I could. A good friend of mine named Ross Bailey was a head trainer at TCU, and he told me about this little private school that was looking for an athletic trainer 28 years ago, and it's been the best decision I ever made. Thank you for having me.
Good evening, I'm Theresa Fuss. I'm a licensed professional counselor. I am the lower school counselor here at Country Day, serving kindergarten through 4th grade and anybody else that will come see me. My background is in special education. I began my career in education 33 years ago, teaching self-contained class with kids with emotional challenges. And I have been a licensed professional counselor since '87. I also work with my animal-assisted therapy dog, my pros, and I have my life coach certification, so I'm very interested in helping parents. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Elaina Rowe. I am the school counseling program director at Trinity Valley School. I'm also the middle school and upper school counselor. I did my undergraduate work at the University of Tennessee, my graduate work at Seattle University and the University of Puget Sound. I started off my career in education as a Montessori teacher, then worked through the K-12 setting with students with learning disabilities before my master's in school counseling. I have been working with students as a school counselor for close to 10 years now and at Trinity Valley for 7.
Good evening. I'm Dr. Joyce Mauk. I'm a neurodevelopmental pediatrician, and I'm the CEO of the Child Study Center here in Fort Worth. And the Child Study Center is a center that serves children with complex developmental disabilities, both to diagnose, treat, and educate those children.
Thank you. Glad you're here. I want to start by just reading a little something that's actually even on the back of your program. Talk about what mental health really is. Mental health describes our emotional, psychological, and social well-being. It affects how we think, feel, and act, how we handle stress, relate to others, and make choices. Contrary to popular belief, your brain is an organ and is affected by diet, exercise, sleep, environment, body chemistry, medications, and treatments, just like the rest of your body. The difference, of course, is that it controls the rest of your body and your action, which is why improving your mental health can have profound effects on everything else in your life. And on this panel for mental wellness, why is it so important? Not just for students, but of families and individuals alike. Because working toward your optimal state of mental wellness means you can best realize your potential. It also means you can best contribute to your family, your friends, your coworkers, your community, and your country. And so this is why better mental health is not just good for each of us individually, it's good for all of us as a society. Everybody agree? All right. Let's start right into it. It's 2014, right? And it's amazing to me, and I've heard this from people in the weeks leading up to this, it's amazing that we're just kind of recognizing that our brain matters in this whole wellness equation. Dr. Mauk, why is that?
It is amazing that that's becoming more of a realization now, and there's lots of research that's very exciting that shows that the effect of early toxic stress or early traumas on children influences not just their mental health, but also their physical health throughout their lifespan. So we know that trauma and traumatic events and problems like frequent hospitalizations, being a witness to violence, things like that can have profound effects on an individual for their lifespan, both mentally and by their physical health.
And Elaina, why is wellness important for our students? Seems obvious.
Well, we would like to see our students working to their full potential from early in K all the way through 12th grade so that they can live a full productive life post primary and secondary school. We want them to have all the skills that they need to go off to college and take advantage of all there is to offer.
And Theresa, why is it important for families? You work with a lot of families members.
Yes, I think wellness is important for families because there is no perfect family, and life happens, and you will have hard times in your family. And the more that families can talk about their situations, their problems, not so much focusing on the problem, but rather what they want to see happen, solutions and using the strengths of everyone. I think the more a family will grow and stay together, kids will be learning how to be healthy emotionally their whole life. They will get them growing up.
So important to start early,
Yes.
and it doesn't stop. Okay. Why the importance of sports in mental wellness? Exercise in general.
Exercise stimulates the body and the mind, and that sounds trite, but the Greeks were talking about that so long ago. But it's just a balance, and you need a balance in your life with exercise and learning, and they don't compete against each other. They work together. The relationship's close, and we have found I don't have any studies, but we found that you know, the kids who are studying, who have a big test coming up, they want desperately to go on the field and exercise and work hard physically, and it helps them decompress and focus, and helps them mentally.
You know, continuing on that, Elaina, this is probably for you. There's new studies out about the importance of play, not just exercise, but play, particularly in an element. Dr. Mauk and Theresa, you might want to chime in on this as well. Can you tell me about that, the importance of play in an academic environment?
Well, I think the play ties into physical activity, absolutely. But the play gives the brain of a young child the opportunity to shift out of the math and the language control centers into the more social, allows them to rest certain parts of their brain so that when they get back into the classroom that they can take more advantage of what content is being taught in the classroom. But that physicality that happens during play, the social, the imaginative play that happens is so vital for them to actually process what they're learning. So what they're taking in the classroom often comes out, in many instances, in the playground, out in their social relationships. So it's a way of solidifying what they're learning, oftentimes in the classroom.
We work a lot with children who have very poor social skills, poor play skills, poor imaginative play, and so those sort in our school setting, those things are built into curriculum and activities because, you know, for life in general, sometimes social skills are more important than how far you got academically. So it really needs to be stressed as being very important.
Well, that kind of leads me into, are we seeing a decrease in these socialization skills through, as someone put it in the submission, those damned phones and incessant texting?
I think probably you guys see that as more than I would.
Well, I think many parents will talk about sitting down at the dinner table and the phone comes with their child and having to, you know, ask their child to disconnect, to turn the phone off and to set it aside. And I think our students are getting in the habit of communicating primarily through the text. I know some parents will also say the best way to reach their child is through a text message versus a phone call versus an in-person meeting. And now, on one hand, it's very nice to be able to have that immediate contact with your child. We don't want that to replace the relationship, the eye contact that happens with the peers, because they sometimes will be sitting side by side with one another, texting one another. So putting some limits on that so that our students are able to look one another in the eye and have that interaction. I know some research will suggest, you know, if you're going to use technology, use FaceTime. Use things that still will encourage that stimulated face-to-face interaction. But I think the more time that we're on our phones, something gives, and oftentimes that is the social relationships. So seeking balance is tricky.
I think we need a structured time, all of us, from small children to adults, to dream our dreams, think of new passions, set new goals, decompress. And when we're always plugged in, that is void in our lives. So we're constantly, I know as an adult, I'm constantly thinking about what I'm missing, what I need to do, how productive I am. And as a person, I become less and less of who I really should be. And the more that I can find time each day to be unstructured and just to think and plan and dream. I think children need unstructured time to practice their roles, to try out roles, to discover their strengths, to explore, to learn about creativity and problem solving. We just need to get unplugged every day, short period of time.
That's a hard thing to do, right? I mean, more and more schools are actually using technology, sending it home as part of their curriculum, part of their homework. And there's that fine balance. And it seems, I think we'll continue to probably try to work that out as we move forward. But Ed, do you see technology impairing in athletics at all? Do you see distraction, phones?
I know the coaches across the line have said, don't bring your phones to practice. That sounds funny, but it's true. I mean, if you let them, they'll be on the bench and doing this instead of paying attention to the game. But I think we all have little stories to tell where we end up either on vacation or in a position where we're with our kids or even just by ourselves and our phone doesn't work, and actually how it turns into a benefit. I know, Jeff, you told a great story about that to us, but it's, it's the same when we go on vacation, we end up in Red River, New Mexico, and our phones don't work as well as they normally do, and it's actually nice. I mean, we actually get to talk to each other, and I think it's a beneficial.
After 20 minutes of sheer terror. How do we improve brain health? Dr. Mauk, what are some things we can do?
Well, I think everybody can improve brain health by some simple things. I mean, what you eat, your exercise, resilience, doing different things. We kind of talked about that, even just turning off the phones. And I have to confess that I email and text 24 hours a day. So it's hard to do that. But I think having downtime, having balance in your life where you're not all work and no play, and all of those things are protective of your brain.
Elaina? Any thoughts on improved brain health? Exercise, diet, sleep, right?
Exercise, diet, and sleep. Rest. I've read quite a bit recently on practicing mindfulness, which is something that is becoming a great interest of mine, and looking at how just taking 5 minutes to be fully present and helping our children develop the skills to be fully present, to where they're sitting and either just focusing on their breath, doing a body scan, where are they holding tension, and they're putting their full attention on what is happening in that present moment, and how that can sometimes simulate exercise, and that ability for the brain to reset, and students able to then refocus to a greater degree. And I find that really, really interesting as far as brain health and taking care of ourselves as individuals and de-stressing in a way that 5 minutes does a good deal of decompression.
Now, this came up a lot in this question submissions. This could be for any of you. Are today's students exposed to more stress than, say, 20 years ago? It's kind of a loaded question. Ed?
I think the stresses are different. I don't know if they're necessarily more. I know this technology obviously provides a lot more opportunity for them to gather information. And, obviously.
We're talking about stress. You said stress is different today.
I'm not going to say they're under more stress than they were. I just know there's more opportunity for them to place stress upon themselves if they're out there texting, receiving text, internet, all that other stuff. As far as the school placing more stress on them, I know there's a bunch of discussion on that. I married an alum, and she said that was pretty stressful. She tells Tiny Kilborn stories to this day. So I know there's some stresses, back then as well.
And anxiety is a very common diagnosis in children, Dr. Mauk. They're probably the most prevalent. Would you not agree?
Anxiety is huge, and we diagnose it all the time. Yes. And I think there's a couple things to think about. I mean, one is that there is stress. They talk about stress being good stress versus toxic stress, and so good stress would be you're worried that you have a test, so you study and you prepare and you're nervous and you do as best you can and so on. Toxic stress is more severe life stressors, traumas, very, very serious issues. And likewise with anxiety is a functional aspect of all of our mental capacities, and that it's appropriate to be anxious if there's something big coming up or something that requires a performance. But we see children, when we diagnose an anxiety disorder, is when they have a pervasive sense of anxiousness that is just unrelated to what's going on around them. And that typically does run in families, and certainly you can do things environmentally to reduce that in children, but it is fairly common.
Yeah, following up on that, I mean, how do you separate developmentally appropriate behaviors from psychological or emotional distress?
I saw that question come across, and then I think the other thing is how do you then also divide them from things that are learned behaviors? You know, what they have learned, say, gets attention in the home or from a student, or gets them out of doing something that they really want to do, and you have to figure out, is that just something that they have learned, or is it a sign that there's something really disturbed in that child, or something wrong with the environment that they're in, or do they not have the skills to do something different? And that's a tricky thing. I think that's part of the art of diagnosis and treatment of children who are exhibiting any kind of problem.
Yeah, and I hear it a lot from parents, and I think this might resonate. It's just, when is my child just being a child? And when is there something wrong? I mean, that is the holy grail of answer, right?
It is, and it's that, like I said, that is part of what, a good clinician or a good therapist has to untangle, is how much is, like a 2-year-old whose friend in daycare takes their toy and they slug them. That doesn't mean that they necessarily have some serious mental illness. They slug them because they can get the toy back, right?
I would say that speaks to the importance of the observations, parent observations and teacher observations within the school setting in conjunction with the testing, because all behavior serves a purpose, and deciding what that purpose is it a coping mechanism, is it a learned behavior, is it something that's being driven by something beyond the child's control, is really hard to tease out. And so really what we do is such a collaborative effort, counselor, parent, diagnosticians, we really have to teamwork these things together because it is so complex.
Theresa, anything to add to that?
When I think about children having difficulties, I always go back to number one, growth and development. There are some predictable behaviors and stages that we as human beings go through our entire life. I know Eric Erickson has it all the way until death, the growth and development stages that we go through. I think it's really important as parents and educators and clinicians to look at growth and development. I think it's important to realize that we as human beings go through times of equilibrium and disequilibrium. And sometimes it's our disequilibrium times that we're learning the most. So I say this to my daughter, and in my family, it's like it's learning time. Every time problems, stumbling blocks seem to come up in our lives, it's learning time. It's our time to grow. And so as we put our heads together as a family to solve different problems, look at where each person in the family is in their growth and development. If we've tried so many things and some of the behaviors keep getting worse, then I think that is the time that you seek professional help and you just see if there's something more needed to help the child or adult or teen become more imbalanced and learn to cope with whatever they're dealing with.
In that, I mean, the importance of parents and community. No one can really do this alone. If you are seeing something, and that's what I'm hearing time and time again, reach out. See a professional. Talk to someone else. Our observational skills can get even a bit myopic with our own children. And it takes that extra set of eyes. And I imagine at Child Study Center, it's a real community effort. Can you talk about that? And the importance of that in a successful treatment plan.
Right. I think, we use a lot of medication, and that is an important part. It addresses the balance from a chemical or physiologic standpoint, but we also do a lot of behavioral intervention and education and some therapy. And so, but what we have to remember is that all of that really doesn't account for much if it's not carried on at home. The child spends much more time with their parents than they do with us, even if that child is there full-time in one of our educational or treatment programs. So it's really important that that gets carried out, and a lot of times we'll see in families where different family members have a different point of view about what's going on with the child. And one of the first things we do is say, you know, you got to figure this out because you got to be consistent with that child. Do the same things, the same interventions. We do, you know, contracts with the families to follow at home and things to help with managing the child consistently across the different environments.
And continuing on the community, Theresa and Elaina and Ed, I mean, how important is it for you to be aware of what's going on at home sometimes? You don't see them, you know, and it's how important, say, when maybe the death of a grandparent, it can even be a loss of a pet. I mean, these things can interrupt and disrupt their normal routines. Talk about that. I'll start with you, Elaina. Just the importance of sharing this kind of information with the counselor, with the teacher, with the coach, with the trainer.
Yeah. It is very important, and it takes a lot of trust to do that, because I know that oftentimes this is when we're at our most vulnerable, when we're having family grief or hardship within our family, and it's very hard to reach out to somebody who you maybe just have, they're not a cursory relationship with them, but you know your counselor, you know your teachers, that this is a different level of trust that you're having to bridge when your family's in crisis. But reaching out is so important, because oftentimes the students need somebody to talk to. They need to know that their teacher, their counselor is there for them, that there are people that they can talk to when they're at school if they need to. Because oftentimes they're thinking about it themselves and maybe suffering silently, distracted in class. And sometimes the teacher awareness is, there's a little extra TLC that can happen in the classroom that'll be very subtle. And it's just reassuring to the young person to know that we are that village, that just because school seems separate from home doesn't mean that we aren't completely connected in those times. So I know it's important for the reassurance for the student, and also as a parent myself, it's helped me knowing that I have an extra eye looking out for my son at times that I've needed that, and having that feedback, how's he doing today? And so I've been grateful for it, and I'm also grateful when people reach out to me and share. It's quite a trust that is established with them.
I think children, really all people, they thrive with structure and consistency. So even if it's a happy event that's happening in your home, like mom and dad are going on a honeymoon vacation and the granny's coming, I think that's a good thing for the school to know about too, because everything suddenly is different and the homework is left behind. And so just, you know, any change in the structure in the home and the routine, to communicate that with the people that care for your children, I think is imperative. So that everybody's on board and knowing where to pick up the pieces when they fall apart.
I agree. I mean, it's so beneficial when we are given a heads up to look out for a certain student, and so we can help them, and so we can nurture them, which is what our jobs are. When a student comes in the training room, and you know, I'm noticing that maybe this, you know, he should be healing faster, or should be, you know, acting a little differently, and then I'm told by our great we communicate really well with the counselors and the nurse. Gives me a heads up that, you know, Johnny, you know, lost his grandfather this weekend. And wow, that explains so much what I see in the training room. And then I pass that information on to the coaches. And it's not to make the kid uncomfortable at all. It's so we can care for the kid, and so we're there for him. And so we know, you know, to look out for him or her, and to, you know, to be there if they need us.
And that's something you might be able to speak to as well, Doctor, because many times my greatest source of referrals is from the school nurse.
Mm-hmm.
It's because it becomes a psychosomatic symptom because something has happened and nobody's talking about it, and then the child has a headache 5 times that day, and that's when the nurse usually well, when it's less than 5 times, but we communicate a lot. And so you may be able to speak to those psychosomatic type symptoms that we see.
Yeah, there's a huge mind-body connection, and it's a lot of times it's more socially acceptable for the child to complain of something or feel that instead of really being able to articulate what's going on. I also want to say that it kind of goes both ways, like you hear from a parent that something's going on at home, but also I'm always amazed as a parent myself, and then also as a physician, what children will tell you if you just sit and listen to them. And a lot of things aren't that good that they tell you, but they seem to be able to, they'll tell you if you take the time to listen to them.
Right. But not always what you want.
Well, I remember when my kids were young and, some kid would sit next to me and start telling me all these things about what was going on at home, and then you go like, whose mom are you?
Ed, concussions in football. It's everywhere.
Yes, sir.
It's everywhere. First of all, in layman's term, what is a concussion?
A concussion is a metabolic response that your brain has to an impact it receives. It's not a brain bleed. A lot of people, when we used to evaluate head injuries, we're always worried about the subdural hematoma or brain bleed, physical damage to the brain, which is life-threatening. Concussions in themselves are not a life-threatening event. Successive concussions can become a life-threatening event, and that's what's so important about recognizing the symptoms of a concussion, getting immediate treatment, and preventing these students from getting another injury to the brain. It's considered a traumatic brain injury, but it's not in the same.
It's usually taken MTBI, mild
Right.
traumatic brain injury.
Yes, and they don't show up on CAT scans. They don't show up on MRIs.
Which makes them tricky.
Yes, it's a symptom-based diagnosis about how the student is reacting and acting and behaving.
And you've been at this a long time. I mean, you're really, really old.
Yeah.
And you married one of my best friends. No, but you've been at this game a long time. Tell me about some of the changes, improvements you've seen in concussion protocol and prevention.
Well, we used to try to. The big thing is helmets, and there was a kind of an alarming report that was put out by the news stations about 2 weeks ago about the FWCD using these old helmets, and I watched the little blurb and kind of laughed because I knew that we were using the top tier helmets. I knew that all our peer schools, Trinity Valley, All Saints, and Green Hill, and all these other schools were too. But the funny thing is that the helmet is designed to prevent a skull fracture, not a concussion. So there is a lot of hype on this helmet thing. I remember, and the gentleman's in the office today, and in the audience today, we had this bubble head thing we used to put on helmets to try to give extra cushion. And that was based on the knowledge that we had at the time, that we thought that the concussion was being caused by the physical blow to the head, and so we wanted to give this helmet more padding or more protection, when actually the concussion's caused from the brain bouncing around inside the cranium. And we're finding out now through research that a lot of the forces are rotational that are causing these problems, and a lot of the scientific evidence is pointing towards a lot of people are sustaining concussions without actually receiving a physical blow to the head. One of your ones is rodeo, and they took some film of rodeo bull riders who were knocked unconscious. And it looks dramatic when you're sitting in the audience at the stock show and you see this guy come down, looks like he's hit the bull and he's out. And they reviewed film after film after film, and they have discovered that a large percentage of those cowboys were unconscious before they left the bull, never receiving a blow to the head because of the rotational forces, that bull, and the gravity, the G-forces that are applied. And that cranium, your brains bounce around inside the cranium. So some linear and longitudinal type of forces.
Yeah, we talked about, they're even studying Formula One race car drivers now because the stress that is put on their brain, mainly under deceleration, going from 200 miles an hour to 40, and about the length of this little stage setup. That's a lot of pressure on the brain. We're learning all kinds of things. But tell me about some of the protocols and safety features you have for concussions at Country Day that are existing now in other schools as well.
Well, there's a state law that was passed about 5 years ago that requires every school that they have a concussion management protocol, but it doesn't cover private schools. But we already were developing one, and we were working with Dr. Damon Blewett at the Ben Hogan Center. And with Ben Hogan and a program called IMPACT, which is a neurocog test that we base our protocol on. And it's a very comprehensive and very detailed program. It begins with, we baseline test every student, 7th grade through 12th grade, and at Fort Worth Country Day. And that's being done at other schools too. I mean, Trinity Valley is in the same type of program, and sort of the other schools. So we have a baseline on the student. We never had that before.
Can you explain that to them?
A baseline is they take the test, and we have a score based on whether on this child's reaction times, memory, composite memory, symbol memorization, things like that. It's a 45-minute test, and I encourage you, if you want to take it, let me know, and I'll set you up. But it's very interesting. So now we have a score on this child. His score does not matter to the football player score, is not compared to the field hockey player score or the cross country runner score. It's just their score. And then we keep those, and gosh, forbid if a year or a month later we suspect this child has a concussion, we give them the same battery of tests again and compare their scores and see how they are. And if they're good, then we have a very positive outlook for this recovery. If they're bad, then we know we have to rehab this child, and we have to take the time to make sure they're fully healed before we let them back in the sport.
This is fascinating stuff. Let's continue on. Tell me about this return to learn, return to play
We used to
policy.
call it return to play protocol. It was set up that way. It's kind of an athletic thing, and then we realized through the course of using the system for the last 6 years that it is more of a return to the classroom, return to learn, because the brain's affected, and the brain is it's not bruised in the sense of, like I was saying before, but it's, if you injure your ankle, I can put a child in a boot, and everybody knows that child has an injured ankle because they're in a boot, they're on crutches, and okay, so we're going to take care of his ankle. But with the concussion, you can't see it. So we have to set up modifications for their learning and for their classroom and for the environment they're in so they can rest. And we were saying that before mental health, and now you said rest. Because that is the top thing for recovery for concussion is rest and not being stimulated. And then we get back to the cell phones again because we take their cell phones away. And that is the hardest thing about the whole process is when you tell this child and the parents, well, you shouldn't use a cell phone, no TV. Really? Are you sure? Yes, we're sure. And so we have classroom recommendations we send to the teachers, notifying them that there's a child that has a concussion, and they're given extra time to take tests. Sometimes they're not even allowed to take a test, but it all depends on how severe their symptoms are. And we might not even let them come to school for a few days. And that, of course, at a school like ours, that opens up another whole can of worms, because now you have the kid who is missing school time, getting behind, but you're trying to rest them. And that's just a balance we have to, and it takes a lot of communication with the parents and the faculty and athletic trainers too, to kind of guide this and hope that get it all working out for the best result, which is the health and well-being of the child.
Yeah, because you said, it is important even that the teachers are informed of this,
Yes.
because this cognitive impairment
Yes.
can easily manifest in their classroom, right? You guys have had some of that at your schools, right?
Well, most definitely. We send out we have a little form on it we send, and it says if you're doing a video or you're doing overhead, I say overhead projection, nobody uses that anymore. It's that board you press down, touch, and all the stuff. If you're using iPads, and these kids will get symptoms, and if they do, they're supposed to be removed from the classroom and sent to my office or the nurse. And we have a room, a dark room, and we have a cot in there, and we put them in there. and we shut the door and we turn off the lights, and they're in dark silence. And that's I make a joke about Leach at Texas Tech, who was fired, I believe, for locking a kid who had a concussion in a closet. And he did the right thing for the wrong reasons. He actually was doing the very best thing he could for the student, but he was punishing him, and that's not why we do it. But actually, we have a dark room in our office, and the nurse, if she gets a little crazy with the kids in there, so she'll send them to us as well if she has a kid that has an issue. But we get a lot of fallout in band. We have a lot of kids who come to school and they say, Trainer Ed, I feel great. Headaches are gone. Okay, let's try a half day. And they get through English and they go to band and they're in my office and they're dizzy again and they're sick to their stomach and they're having pounding headaches. And so it's the stimulus like that.
Country Day band that bad?
No comment. I sure will.
No, I know what you mean.
We're working on a Christmas song right now.
Stimulation. It's all the stimulation.
Yes.
Overstimulation. Which is, a lot of people believe that our children are overstimulated as a whole. But also at the same time, Dr. Mauk, we were talking earlier, this is a really exciting time in neuroscience. This is where it is. We know more about space than we know about our brain. But that's changing, we like to say at the Mental Health Channel, by the hour. Literally studies are coming down. The children's brains, for the most part, past 20, 25 years, have been neglected in research. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, children in general are a neglected group in a lot of medical research and neurologic research, and partly it's because the money's made in dealing with adults and things like that they'll tend to get ignored. But more and more studies are coming out using children, and the things that are really exciting are some of the functional studies where we're now able with neuroimaging, functional MRI, and things like that, able to study the brain in action. And we've always mostly had things that were static, looking at structure as opposed to function. And so there's more and more coming out now that is really showing us how the brain works.
And does that translate eventually directly into your classroom, into your program?
It will eventually, I believe, yes. We're really on the cutting edge with some of these things, and some of the EEG technology and stuff like that is all, we're right there, not to where it can be really very useful from a clinical standpoint. And the things that we know about the brain are still, I think, are going to still be the same, which is that if you want something to occur, if it's a desirable behavior or a desirable skill, what you want to do is practice that. And that's, I think we're going to have all kinds of fancy technology, and what it's going to tell us is that if you want it to keep coming back, practice.
Same old message.
Yep.
There's a lot of rush. You hear it all the time, people to be diagnosed ADHD. It's kind of, and you guys can speak on this too. I want to ask Dr. Mauk first, what goes into an accurate
ADHD diagnosis?
And then treatment?
It's still, ADHD is still a clinical diagnosis. It's not, we can't yet do imaging or EEG testing with any clinical certainty to pinpoint a certain pattern. So it's really looking at a pattern of behavior that is persistent in a home and school in multiple settings of inattention and hyperactivity and impulsivity. So we look at how that child is functioning in different settings. The other thing that I think is most important is that we have to rule out a whole bunch of things. And sometimes they can be done just by a history, but you want to make sure that there's not health issues, there's not sleep issues, there's not nutritional issues, the child is not having some problems because they have learning problems and they really can't perform in the classroom setting that they're in, that there's not something horrendous going on at home so that they can't focus during the day, they're not coming to school hungry. All those sorts of things we have to rule out. Many children need to have a full psychological battery to look for learning problems, as well as how well they're able to attend. So that's that. And in terms of if a diagnosis is made and is made appropriately, then there should be multiple arms to the treatment as well. So you would be looking at medication, which is extremely effective for appropriately diagnosed ADHD. But you'd also be looking at things like classroom modifications, preferential seating, the way the assignments are given, a number of things like that, rewarding their attention.
Which sounds, that process is a lot more extensive than just going to your pediatrician or general practitioner with ADHD.
It is. Now, there's a lot of, at the Child Study Center, we see the complex neurodevelopmental problems, so that we tend to see children with ADHD who are really tough to diagnose because of other co-occurring illnesses and cognitive problems, behavior problems, and stuff like that. Most pediatricians are now being trained much better to be able to pick up these disorders than they were in the past. So the curriculum of the schools, the medical schools and pediatric residency programs are better at that.
You know, and a lot of parents, I hear it a lot, they're so afraid of a diagnosis. Their child is being diagnosed. Elaina, I'm sure you have that. I mean, some people won't even share because, for whatever reason. Talk about, what would you say to a parent whose child has just been diagnosed with neurological behavioral disorder, and how do you help them cope with that? And more importantly, that this is a beginning.
You took my words.
Sorry.
It is a beginning. Oftentimes what has led a family down the path towards a diagnosis through testing and other therapies is that there has been an observable issue, a struggle, a challenge that led the family and the child to reach out for help. And so that diagnosis, while can be intimidating at times, it often gives direction for how to appropriately treat, whether it be through therapy, medication, modifications in the classroom, all of these things that wouldn't happen without that diagnosis. And additionally, often the diagnosis being the beginning means that you now have a treatment plan, things to follow, skills to build, that eventually will lead. It's not a limitation often. It is something that most folks who can look down, retrospectively 10, 15, 20 years down the road will say that actually became my strength. I've actually turned this into something that has become my gift. And it's a matter of looking at it, talking about it as a family, talking about it with your child, collaborating with the school, getting the appropriate treatment professionals on board with you to kind of create that wraparound approach. And it actually, it's a beginning. It's a beginning of healing. It's a beginning of health. Of what was a challenge now becomes a different sort of challenge, where it's a manageable challenge, something that can be treated and worked with.
Theresa.
I don't like diagnoses. I like behaviors. What are the behaviors that are giving you difficulties? What are the things you need to learn to achieve the things you want to achieve in your life? And most importantly, what are your strengths? And how are we going to use those strengths to get you where you need to go? Because you will get there. I think it's good to teach children and teens and even adults that are diagnosed. You know, it is what it is. I used to hate that saying, but I love it the older I get. It is what it is. Now what? You can't change always how your mind functions and how you think and what your strengths are or what your weaknesses are, but you can work on them and you can find other ways to achieve goals. So I think it's good to be at peace with who you are and what you've been dealt and move on. Find ways to still go forward using your strengths.
You know, I think a diagnosis, it's a code that our system, our healthcare system and our educational system works from. It doesn't mean that you are this thing. It's a code. I mean, just in in a mental or psychiatric diagnosis, I mean, in the same way that if you have a broken ankle, it means you get a splint for your ankle or a cast or whatever. It's the same thing. It opens the code that you can get these services or these
Right.
treatments.
It's not an individual defining care.
Exactly,
Yes.
yes.
Period. Just ankle sprains are graded, right?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
It's the same kind of thing.
It's also not an
But
excuse.
they're not all the same.
And it's also not an excuse.
It's not an excuse. Whatever your diagnosis is,
For the
it's not an
parent and the
excuse.
child.
Right.
Yes.
Mhm.
No, it's true. And, but I've seen time and time again of people, everybody comes in the same way. They fear maybe being diagnosed or having some sort of identifier put on them. But in a positive sense, if it is accurate and you've got good people in place and your family's behind it, that can be the beginning of the productive life that we read about at the very beginning. So
Instead of letting it define.
instead of letting
She's bipolar. He has, he's ADHD. No, he's a child. He's a person.
that's right.
And he has these weaknesses. How can we help it?
And the importance of, like as you said, those codes too, though, they become valuable identifiers for, let's say, a peer group. It's important, let's say, if Sally has been diagnosed potentially with bipolar disorder, it's important that that peer group knows what that is and what to look for. And that's, one of the reasons we wanted to have this discussion too, is the reality is that, there's 70 million people in America with a diagnosis of a mental disorder today that we know of. And the reality is that if everybody were to get diagnosed and all these treatments, there aren't enough clinicians, there aren't enough Dr. Mauks, Elainas, Theresa's, Eds for people to go to. So the importance of a community to understand at a basic level of what mental health is, what the major disorders are. These are how tragedies are prevented. That's our belief. Mental health channel. That's kind of why we're talking this now. And Ed, in what you do and what you see in sports, obviously concussions are the big deal. That's the big buzzword. But that's not everything you're looking at on a day-to-day basis to prevent for maintain a child's wellness and safety. What are some of the other things and protocols you have in place?
Protocols we have in place, I mean, we have like heat illness protocols and things that I've written. But anytime a student has an injury, you have to explore their mental health because a little bit. You have to get involved because it's been described almost like the 7 stages of grieving when there's a death. When a kid has it depends on the level of the injury, but even student A can have a mild ankle sprain and still grieve as much as a student who maybe tore an ACL and is out for the year. So yeah, we have to look at that and see how they're reacting to the injury and work with them on a mental level as well as. And I don't have a protocol written for that, but that's just
It's just an awareness.
so awareness you have of individuals and how unique they are and how you can't cookie cut every single athletic injury condition, just like you can't cookie cut all the diagnosis that they're going to all be the same and react the same.
Right. It'd be great if everybody fit into one simple category. That way. Elaina and Theresa, this is probably for you. I love this question someone submitted. What is mental wellness for a family? How do we practice mental wellness for a family, and what does that look like?
I think a lot of it involves conversation. The closest that a family experiences with talking often, talking young, for parents to become that voice in their child's head from a young age, knowing that no matter what's going on, mom and dad, brother, sister, extended family, grandma, grandpa, they're all there to listen and to support and to develop those resiliency skills. That really is what, when we talk about families that practice mental wellness, it's families that are creating within their family structure that safe zone where no matter what's happening, what the child's done, they have somebody that they can go to, that they can talk to, and that they can talk openly about it, even if it's, I'm feeling sad today. Why is that? Tell me what's going on. Or if it's frustration, and having all those emotions being okay to talk about It's when our kiddos feel like they can't talk, they shut down and they don't have a place to go, and then they're left to kind of process those things on their own. And sometimes the conclusions that they come to, depending on their developmental age, may not be the ones that are healthy or ones that we would want them to come to. So being able to talk these things out and finding those times to take the break, so rest. Families have to rest as well. And if you find that you're always on the go, even if it's taking that hour to just sit, out on the back porch and just kind of be with one another, times like that are helpful as often as you can do it, because I know we are incredibly busy with athletic events and the rigors of education and studying. But really looking at what resiliency practices as a family can have in place with connectedness, with rest and having those family times with dinner. You hear a lot about that, and unplugging from our devices so that we can be present. I think those are some really key components from my perspective that contribute to mental wellness within the family structure.
I think something that's really important, not only when you're finding a mate before you get married, in some faiths they make you go through these classes where you talk about your values and your goals for your life together. I think that couples and families need to think about that all through their life, and sitting down and thinking about what do we value. Like Stephen Covey said, you start building something by thinking of the end product that you want. Who do you want your children to become? And write those goals down, write the list and keep the list going. Who do we want our family to be? And then look at how you spend your time. Is your time, the way you spend your time, does it correlate with your values? Are you teaching those values by how you act, how you treat others, how you take care of yourself? One of the parenting classes that I'd like to do is conscious discipline. And Dr. Becky Bailey, she says we can't teach our children anything that we don't do ourselves. So I have to model all of that. And I know as a parent, I see all my faults played out right before me. Some of them I didn't know until I had children. And it's like, wow, that's me. That is me. I taught you that. And I think it's healthy to realize that families are like the gears of a clock. And when something's going on with one person or one person is changing, everybody else is changing in one way or another. So realizing how you're functioning as a family. I teach children that all feelings are a blessing. And I teach young children, so this is real simplistic. It fits into two categories: comfortable feelings and uncomfortable feelings. We need uncomfortable feelings because it's those times when we're feeling angry, fear, frustrated. It's our body's way of saying, hey, you're off balance. Problem solve. What's going on in your life? So I think the more that you can teach your family how to do that. We're going to go through hard times. You will make big mistakes. And this is a double negative, but I just like it the way it sounds. I think your kids need to hear there's nothing we can't handle as a family. And I think they need to hear you will make mistakes. You will fail sometimes. But we're going to handle it as a family. So that's my parenting one way.
About the Chisholm household. No mental wellness there.
We bought some chickens. That's exactly what you say. Now we go out and we sit on the porch and we watch it. It's amazing. The chickens are amazing. I can't believe it. Decompress watching the chickens run around the yard chasing grasshoppers.
I love it. Yeah, it's as simple as that.
It's very simple. Yeah. Move out to the country.
How early can you start talking to children about mental health, brain health, and their common disorders to watch out? Dr. Mauk?
I think that's a little bit out of my field. I think kids do learn what you model for them. And so I think, if they're raised in a family where everybody screams, they'll learn to scream, and they'll think that's the norm. So I think parents need to realize that and model what they think is the best behavior as much as they can.
Elaina, anything to add to that? No. All right, well, we're getting close to the end, so I want to just leave with one. Also, I saw this a lot. There was a lot of questions submitted about, the rigors of an independent school. And I think there's stress whether you're an independent school or not. And as I got this, as parents, how do we help manage that stress while also wanting to promote them to do the best they can? To make the good grade, to become better at something, and acknowledging that there's all this stress that they're experiencing. What balance can parents find in both supporting them and trying to reduce the stress? It's a good question.
It's a complicated question because we are all in an academically rigorous environment, and how it goes back to what Theresa said and Dr. Mauk, what we model. And as parents, we have to be the ones that sometimes help our children figure out when is it time to take a break, when, putting into their study time those brain breaks, allowing some downtime, doing some physical exercise to kind of reset when they need to. But it is a challenge, and balance is very difficult, but we do the best that we can, given everything that we have on our plate. And I think taking that time for self-care and modeling that ourselves with diet, sleep, and exercise, and talking about when you're feeling tired, and modeling, okay, I'm feeling tired today, so I think I'm gonna take something off my plate. I'm gonna, something that I've got my list of things I'm gonna do today, but you know what, today we're gonna hang out, you and me, with Daniel, and we're just gonna take some time together, and we're gonna regroup. And when we do that, oftentimes we find that we're more efficient when we have to pick up that torch again, whether it be academics or athletics. So by taking time to rest and relax, we actually give ourselves more stamina and can tackle things better when we're coming from a place of groundedness. But it's very difficult, and balance is something that is, it's always on a pendulum.
Teresa's answer, it's okay if you fail too. It's rigorous. It's designed almost that you will fail at some point, so you can build yourself back up. It's all part of the process of maturation and becoming a better scholar and a better person. And there's nothing we can't get through. Yeah, it's awesome.
Well, thank you guys. Let's thank our panelists. Now, Mr. Evan Peterson. Thank you.
Thank you for coming this evening. As I was sitting, listening, I want to end where we started. Mental health describes our emotional, our psychological, and our social well-being. It affects how we think, feel, act, and how we underline needs. How we handle stress, how we relate to others, and how we make choices. We're here tonight in an educational institution where it is very stressful. The one word that I heard over and over again from our panel tonight was modeling. I want to tell you a story. I like to talk on topics by telling stories. Back about 55 years ago, ooh, that's a long time, I did not like to read. I couldn't read. I'd go to class and we'd Dick and Spot and Jane and Puff and all the animals and all the creatures, and I'd be following along, and the book was not making any sense to me at all. Absolutely no sense to me at all. And we went through a couple of grades. And one day, coming out of church, Mrs. Cargill, who was my 5th grade teacher, whom I adored. I wanted to marry Miss Cargill so many times. Every time I saw her, I proposed, and she ignored me. Thank goodness she did, because I married Gail, and that was a good choice. But anyway, Mrs. Cargill was walking out of church with my parents and said to my mother one day, "Have you ever thought about having Evan's eyes checked?" Well, my parents were not educated people, and their thinking was, young eyes don't need to be fixed. They're young eyes. It's old eyes that wear glasses. Well, in 5th grade, I was introduced to my first pair of glasses, and I learned how to read, and I learned that I enjoyed reading. But the journey to learning how to read the way I wanted to read really hit its pace when I went to college, and I realized all these textbooks that I had to read in such a short period of time, and it was in college that I learned how to read. So how long did it take me to figure out that I couldn't read, why I couldn't read, and then go through the process of learning how to read? And how handicapped or how far behind was I in all those years of education? That's a little bit like we're talking about mental health today. As parents, we've got to model the behavior that we want our children to emulate. How we want them to behave, how we want them to act, the kind of person we want them to grow up to be. And ladies and gentlemen, you can't start modeling when they're 15 years old and driving you crazy, because they'll never catch up to where they need to be in society, in relationships, in their careers, and how they handle stress. If you are running around the house absolutely stressed out, your children will understand that's unlivable behavior. I can tolerate that behavior. People tolerate that behavior. If you are not being truthful, be that in a relationship, be that with your children, if you're telling them stories that you know are not true, they realize eventually that those are stories, and it's okay to tell stories. It's okay to behave the way you want to behave. If you're not accountable to one another in the family, they'll learn very early on, at 1 year old, 2 years old, 3 years old. Those patterns are starting to be developed, and their mental health is being adversely affected by your behavior, by how you're thinking, by what you're doing. So modeling is so important. We try here at school to model the behaviors that we are looking for in our children. We talk about our core values all the time. We did today in the upper school. We spent today in the upper school talking about our core values. These are behaviors, ideas, and philosophies we want you to know and watch us as we go through our life as educators, as models to what's going on. So, what did we hear tonight? 1, unplug, slow up, spend time together, be a family. There was also a question about stress. The stresses have changed dramatically in the last 20 years in this business. And again, I'm taking you back a few years ago. 55 years ago, 50 years ago, the stress that was put on a student at school was something like, we're going to have a nuclear war with Russia, they've taken Cuba, and you've got to climb underneath your desk, cover up, duck and cover was the term, and that was going to help you through the nuclear war. I got under my desk every time the whistle would blow and waited for the nuclear bomb to go off, but I was going to be okay because I was underneath that desk. Okay? That was the stress of the mid-60s. The stress today is far more in the face. One, the clientele that our schools deal with are, for the most part, very educated and successful parents and grandparents. And that wasn't the case back in the mid-60s. Most parents did not, of that generation, go off to college. So there is a stress already put on a child that, will I be as good or better than my parents? We don't know we're doing it, but it is stressful. They sense that. As they get older, they sense that because it's in their face. Study, do well, or you won't get into college. Study, do well, you need to get a scholarship. Study, do well, you're going to be a doctor. study, do well because look at me. As your father, I'm so successful. That's stress. We think it is helping our child, helping our students keep their eye on the prize. And I've seen that backfire so many times in the years that I've been in this business. Ladies and gentlemen, that will take care of itself. Love your children, enjoy your children, spend time with your children, unplug your children, and unplug yourselves. One last story and then I'll say thank you. We go down to the dining hall one day and I'm sitting there with the faculty, we're having lunch. And I see this young mother come in, and she's coming in with her child, and they're so excited. The child is so excited to see mom and have lunch with her, and we love that. We just think that's really part of being our community. And they go through the line, and they get their food, and they go to these, I call them the cocktail tables. They're the high tables with the high seats. You know, so, but nonetheless, mom sits down with the child across the table. So it's two seats facing each other. We watched mother not once in the 20 minutes she was having lunch with her child put her phone down. Not once. She was reading and eating, stopping and texting, reading and eating, stopping and texting. And I don't think she looked at her child 5 minutes in the whole time she came to have lunch with her child. So in her mind, she was doing the right parenting thing. She was spending time with her child. And in reality, she was as far away from her child as she was in another state. And that's what we've got to stop. You can help your child's mental health, and you can help your own mental health by unplugging, slowing up, and letting life surround. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for coming this evening. We appreciate it. To the Alumni Association, thank you very much. I know Josh is still out there. Josh, thank you. This is the type of thing I hope we continue through the Alumni Association, where we come together and we talk about topics that are relevant to school and to home, to children and to adults. I thank you for coming this evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.